These are the lunches that built skyscrapers, fueled cross-country trains, and held together the backbone of the working class. Back before fast food and protein bars, these humble, hearty meals made it into battered lunch pails and thermoses across America, getting men and women through shift after shift. These weren't about gourmet, they were about getting by, on grit, on thrift, on whatever was left in the pantry. Let's take a walk down memory lane and open up a lunchbox full of the past. Here are 25 blue-collar lunches no one packs anymore. Plowman's Lunch. There was nothing fancy about the Plowman's Lunch, and that's exactly what made it special. Picture a heavy hunk of sharp cheddar, a wedge sliced right off the block, sitting beside crusty bread, just waiting for a smear of butter. Pickled onions gave the whole meal a punch, and if you were lucky, you'd have a scoop of Branson pickle relish to layer everything with that classic British tang. Hard-boiled eggs were a mainstay, cheap, full of protein, and a perfect match for cheese. Maybe a cold cut of ham or a slice of pork pie for variety, and an apple for dessert. Everything was portable, unfussy, and built to last until the end of a double shift in the fields or at the foundry. Meat hand pies. You could always spot a miner by the pasty in his lunch pail. Cornish pasties and pork pies weren't just food, they were survival. Thick crimped pastry kept the contents hot for hours, whether it was minced beef, potatoes, rutabaga, or onions. Laborers gripped the edge of the crust with coal-black fingers, eating the filling and tossing the sooty handle. Pork pies, meanwhile, came with savory pork jelly poured inside, setting solid as it cooled. Whether eaten hot or cold, the pastry stayed crisp, and the filling was as rich and meaty as payday itself. A meal in your hand, built to withstand hard work, hard times, and hard travel. Cold baked bean sandwich. There was a time when opening your lunch meant seeing 2 slices of bread glued together with cold baked beans. Sounds simple? That's the point. Baked beans straight from the can, with their sticky tomato sauce, got spread thick across white bread or rye. There were no frills and certainly no complaints, because beans were cheap, filling, and packed with enough sugar and protein to get you through the day. It was the taste of practicality, a little sweet, a little tangy, always reliable. In factory towns and railroad camps, you'd see these sandwiches in every other lunchbox, a testament to the genius of making do with what you had. Scotch eggs. Few things said treat like a Scotch egg tucked beside your flask of tea. It started with a hard-boiled egg, blanketed in seasoned sausage meat, then rolled in breadcrumbs and fried to a golden crisp. The shell cracked as you bit in, giving way to juicy pork and the creamy yielding center of egg. Calorie dense? Absolutely. But that was the point. A couple of these kept hunger at bay for hours. The recipe traveled from British pubs to American rail yards and foundries, each family adding their own twist. Some liked them spicy, some herby, but everyone agreed. Nothing beat the bite of a Scotch egg on your break. Corned beef salad sandwiches. After World War II, corned beef became a lunchbox staple, especially in America's Midwest and South. Corned beef salad sandwiches were made from chopped canned corned beef, tossed with mayonnaise, a squirt of mustard, maybe some chopped pickles, or a little relish for tang. Sometimes lettuce or even hard-boiled eggs made their way in for extra texture. This was the lunch of thrift, a creamy, savory blend packed between slices of white bread. Canned meats were a post-war lifesaver, stretching pennies without sacrificing flavor. These sandwiches showed up everywhere. Work sites, schools, picnics, even church potlucks. The taste was tangy and satisfying, and the memory still lingers for many. Beef dripping toast. Beef dripping toast is the kind of working man's comfort food that tastes like Sunday dinner, even if it's Wednesday on the clock. You took a slice of hearty bread, toasted or not, and slathered on beef drippings saved from the previous night's roast. The best bites had little brown jelly bits, full of concentrated flavor, a pinch of salt, pepper, maybe a dash of malt vinegar, and you had yourself a greasy, savory masterpiece. No butter needed, the drippings did all the work. For those who grew up with it, beef dripping toast is the taste of home, warmth, and scraping by. It was cheap, filling, and nothing went to waste. Pickled egg and bread. Pickled eggs were the blue-collar answer to protein on the go. Hard-boiled eggs soaked in vinegar and spices, sometimes with a clove of garlic or a pinch of chili, took on a tangy punch that woke up any lunch. Pair one with a slab of soft buttered bread or a humble dinner roll, and you had a lunch that was as cheap as it was nourishing. The eggs, slightly rubbery and tinged pink from the brine, had a sharp flavor balanced perfectly by the bland comfort of bread. This classic was a staple of lunch counters, factories, and New England diners, a no-nonsense meal for people who didn't have time to fuss. Miner's pasty. Nothing says sticking power like a miner's pasty. Built to survive a day's hard labor, these thick pastry pockets were loaded with diced beef, potatoes, rutabaga, and onions, all sealed in a crust tough enough to weather a trip underground. The filling was hearty and homey, spiced simply with salt and pepper, meant to fuel bodies working in the cold and dark. The best part? You could eat it with your hands, no plates, forks, or napkins needed. Every bite was a taste of home and a reminder of where you came from. The crust kept the insides hot till lunchtime and the memory warm for years after. Spam fritters. During World War II, Spam was the king of the blue-collar lunch. When fresh meat was rationed, Spam fritters became the lunch you could count on. Thick slices of Spam were dipped in batter and fried until golden, the outsides crispy and hot, the insides salty, soft, and just a little bit chewy. They were greasy, filling, and more comforting than you'd care to admit. The flavor was smoky, the texture satisfying, and the nostalgia runs deep. Spam fritters lingered in factory towns and working-class kitchens long after the war was over. A crispy, salty answer to the eternal question. What's for lunch? Stew in a thermos. You knew you were loved when you found a steaming hot stew in your thermos. Chunks of beef or pork, potatoes, carrots, maybe a handful of peas, all simmered for hours until the flavors melded into something magical. The thick, rich broth kept its heat tucked away, ready for your midday break. Workers braving winter shifts, truckers crossing icy highways, and kids waiting for the bell all looked forward to that first hot sip. Packing stew was a point of pride, a way to keep warm, to stretch leftovers, and to make sure everyone had enough to get through the day. Nothing beat it. Cold roast beef sandwich. The cold roast beef sandwich is an American classic that deserves a comeback. Thin slices of juicy roast beef, seasoned with salt and pepper, layered thick between slices of chewy white bread or rye. Sometimes you'd get a smear of horseradish or mustard for a bit of a kick, and maybe a slice of Swiss or cheddar if you were feeling fancy. No bells, no whistles, just the pure, unadulterated taste of beef. This sandwich was the star of lunchboxes in steel mills, offices, and schoolyards alike. The kind of meal that didn't need warming up. Each bite was perfect as it was. Egg and cress sandwich. The egg and cress sandwich was proof that the simple things could be the best. Hard-boiled eggs, chopped and mixed with just enough mayonnaise or butter, then topped with a heap of peppery cress, all of it tucked between slices of soft white bread. The result? Creamy, fresh, and surprisingly filling. This lunch was especially beloved during times of rationing, when meat was scarce but eggs and greens could be found in most kitchens. The gentle richness of the eggs played off the spicy bite of cress, making each bite more interesting than the last. It was cheap, cheerful, and always a welcome sight. Cornbread and buttermilk. If you grew up in the South, cornbread and buttermilk was probably a staple in your lunchbox. Leftover cornbread from last night's dinner, crumbly and golden, crumbled into a cup or bowl, then covered with cold, tangy buttermilk. Some called it poor man's pudding, but the flavor was pure comfort. The cornbread soaked up the buttermilk, becoming soft and creamy, with just enough sweetness to balance the tang. It was filling, cheap, and used up leftovers, 3 keys to any great working-class meal. Whether eaten with a spoon or sipped right out of the cup, it stuck with you all afternoon. Fried potato cakes. Some of the best lunches are born from leftovers. Take fried potato cakes, mashed potatoes mixed with a little flour, butter, maybe a sprinkle of herbs, then shaped into patties and pan-fried till crispy brown. The insides stay fluffy, the outsides develop that irresistible crunch. It was a way to turn yesterday's dinner into today's lunch, and nobody complained. Potato cakes were easy to carry, easy to eat, and filling as could be. In the South and Midwest, they were a staple, crammed into lunchboxes, wrapped in wax paper, and ready to go by the time the noon whistle blew. Bacon fat crackers. Talk about making do. Bacon fat crackers were a lesson in thrift. Instead of tossing out bacon grease, smart cooks would mix it with flour, a little salt, and just enough sugar, then roll the dough thin and bake until golden. The result was a crispy, smoky cracker that packed a punch of bacon flavor in every bite. It was the ultimate zero-waste snack. Nothing wasted, everything used. You could eat them as is or with cheese, and they made even the dreariest lunch feel a little bit special. In hard times, bacon fat crackers were a treat that proved resourcefulness was always on the menu. Boiled sausage and pickles. Sometimes lunch didn't need bells or whistles. Boiled sausage and pickles were about as basic as you could get. Sausage links, usually bratwurst or kielbasa, simmered in water or broth until plump, then tucked beside a crunchy pickle spear. No frills, just salt, fat, and a little tang. It was quick, easy, and filling, perfect for packing on the fly or eating cold on a lunch break. You might not dream of this meal today, but for plenty of workers, it was all about what worked. And this, simple as it was, did the trick day after day. Mustard green wraps. Toward the end of the 20th century, as people became more health conscious, mustard green wraps made their way into the workplace. Instead of heavy bread, you'd take fresh mustard greens and wrap them around seasoned fillings. Sometimes sautéed vegetables and beans, sometimes lean meats or rice. The greens added a peppery bite, and the wraps themselves felt lighter than the traditional lunchbox fare. Their roots go back to African American kitchens, where making the most of garden produce was a way of life. Tasty, nutritious, and portable, mustard green wraps were a clever way to mix things up without losing sight of tradition. Cold fish cakes. Cold fish cakes are a little luxury disguised as leftovers, made by mixing flaked cooked fish, usually cod or haddock, with mashed potatoes, herbs, and spices, then forming into patties and frying till golden. Once cooled, the cakes became even firmer and developed a deeper flavor. The outside stayed crisp, the inside tender and savory. Paired with a dollop of tartar sauce, or even just a wedge of lemon, these cakes were a lunchtime favorite, especially in coastal towns. Budget-friendly and nutritious, cold fish cakes made sure no scrap of last night's dinner went to waste. Savory oat cakes. Before granola bars and energy bites, there were savory oat cakes. Just oats, flour, butter, salt, and water, baked or griddled into dense, chewy rounds that could power you through the toughest afternoon. Sometimes there'd be cheese or herbs mixed in for extra flavor, but the classic oat cake was all about simple sustenance. British immigrants brought these hearty snacks to America, where they spread from New England to the Midwest. Wrapped in wax paper or tin foil, oat cakes were there when you needed them most. A little taste of home on a long day. Roasted chestnuts and salt. On cold winter mornings, nothing was more comforting than a handful of roasted chestnuts sprinkled with salt. Roasting brought out the natural sweetness of the chestnut, while a dash of salt balanced everything perfectly. Crack open the shell, scoop out the creamy, almost candy-like inside, and you had a snack that warmed you from the inside out. Roasted chestnuts go back generations, part of family picnics and holidays as much as work lunches. For Native Americans, settlers, and city kids alike, they were proof that sometimes the simplest foods are the most memorable. Liver pâté sandwiches. Not everyone loved liver, but for those who did, a liver pâté sandwich was something special. Chicken, duck, or pork liver was cooked with butter, cream, herbs, and spices, then blended into a smooth, rich spread. Rye bread was the classic pairing, but any sturdy loaf would do. The result was a sandwich that felt downright luxurious, even if it only cost pennies. The savory, earthy flavor of the pâté paired beautifully with a slice of pickle or a swipe of mustard. In the right hands, it was a lunch fit for a king, or at least for a very lucky worker. Fried bologna and cheese sandwich. If you grew up in the Midwest or the South, chances are you had more than your share of fried bologna and cheese sandwiches. Bologna slices fried in a skillet until the edges curled and the centers puffed up, then slapped on bread with a slice of American cheese, sometimes grilled to gooey perfection. It was called redneck steak by some, but for others, it was simply a treat. Cheap, filling, and packed with salty flavor, this sandwich stuck with you all afternoon. Add some yellow mustard, and you had a classic lunch that never failed to satisfy. Peanut butter and bacon sandwich. Few lunchbox pairings are as bold as peanut butter and bacon. The combination of creamy, salty peanut butter and crisp, smoky bacon was once all the rage, especially in the mid-20th century. Some folks even took it a step further and added banana slices for an Elvis special. Whether you liked yours crunchy or smooth, this sandwich was a study in contrasts: rich, salty, sweet, and always a little indulgent. It was quick to make, easy to pack, and surprisingly satisfying, offering a big punch of energy for a tiny price. Fish sticks. The rise of the frozen fish stick in the 1950s changed the lunch game. Easy to cook, even easier to pack. Fish sticks found their way into lunchboxes and thermoses all over the country. Breaded and fried until crisp, they were served cold or at room temperature with a little tartar sauce or a squirt of ketchup. Kids and adults alike loved them for their mild flavor and crunchy coating. For working parents, they were a reliable, affordable source of protein. Fish sticks became a lunchtime mainstay for good reason. They just worked. Fluffernutter sandwich. Few lunches are as nostalgic as the Fluffernutter. A simple sandwich of white bread, peanut butter, and marshmallow fluff. It started in Massachusetts, but quickly spread across America. Born during World War I and nicknamed Liberty Sandwiches, Fluffernutters were a cheap source of calories and instant energy. Sweet, sticky, and utterly satisfying, this sandwich was a treat, tucked in lunchboxes from the factory floor to the schoolyard. Sometimes they got a sprinkle of chocolate chips or a smear of jelly. But the classic combo of salty peanut butter and marshmallow fluff was all you needed for a little slice of joy in the middle of the workday. Thanks for joining us on this delicious trip down memory lane. These blue-collar lunches tell the story of hard work, family, and the simple meals that fueled generations. If you enjoyed reminiscing or learned something new, don't forget to hit that like button, share this video with friends, and subscribe for more hearty, nostalgic content just like this. Got a favorite old-school lunch we missed? Drop it in the comments below. We'd love to hear your stories.